carbon tax election now.
That Justin Trudeau has to resign.
And put it for a confidence vote tonight.
To call their own. And the Conservatives are laughing.
Canada's political crisis. Decline of Trudeau's leadership. Trudeau faces backlash. Trudeau faces backlash as Deputy Prime Minister Freeland resigns after public criticism.
People can't afford their groceries. People can't find a home to call their own. And the Conservatives are laughing.
The NDP leader is absolutely right. This cannot continue. This Prime Minister cannot go on like this. Housing costs have doubled. Food bank use has doubled. The debt has doubled. Gun crime has doubled. And now we face troubling tariff threats from a president who can see weakness coming from a mile away. The Prime Minister must leave this job, but there's only one person who can remove him, and that's the leader of the NDP. Will he put the country ahead of his pension and vote for a carbon tax election now?
With respect to that, I've said that all options are on the table. That means everything is possible. But what is clear, given what we have seen, Justin Trudeau and a Liberal government that are focused on themselves, they are infighting at a time when people cannot even do their groceries. They can't even find homes that are affordable. And we've got the threat of Donald Trump and 25% tariffs that mean hundreds of thousands of jobs are at risk. Because of that, I'm saying very clearly that Justin Trudeau has to resign. All options on the table. Thank you very much. Merci. Thank you.
The minister is resigning, the finance minister is resigning in the middle of an economic crisis, and a fifth of his Liberal caucus has lost confidence in him. Justin Trudeau has lost control, and yet he clings to power. We cannot accept this kind of chaos, division, weakness, while we're staring down the barrel of a 25% tariff from our biggest trading partner and closest ally, which, by the way, is headed by a newly elected president with a strong and fresh mandate, a man who can spot weakness from a mile away. Ms. Freeland has been Mr. Trudeau's.
Hey everyone, if you've been keeping up with the news out of Canada, you know things are getting pretty interesting up north.
Oh yeah.
We're seeing some serious political drama unfolding, especially around Justin Trudeau and his government.
Definitely.
So today we're going to take a deep dive into all of that.
Yeah.
Specifically, we're going to be looking at the recent resignation of Deputy PM Chrystia Freeland.
Big news.
And we've got some great articles and analysis to help us unpack what's been going on.
Should be fascinating.
So let's jump right in. It's pretty wild to see how much Trudeau's image has changed in just a few years.
Yeah.
Right?
It really is.
I mean, remember Trudeau Mania?
Oh, I do, yeah.
He was on the cover of Rolling Stone, winning awards internationally.
Yeah, he was like a global progressive rock star.
But the articles we're looking at today paint a much different picture.
Yeah.
His approval ratings have plummeted, like way down below 30%.
Wow.
What happened?
Well, it's complicated, but part of it has to do with the fact that he's leading a minority government.
Right.
Which means he needs the support of other parties to pass legislation and stay in power.
So in this case, that means he has to rely on the New Democratic Party or NDP.
Exactly.
I see.
And that can be a pretty precarious situation because their priorities don't always line up.
Yeah, I imagine it's like walking a political tightrope.
It really is.
He has to keep the NDP happy to avoid triggering an election, but they have different ideologies and priorities.
Right. They don't always see eye to eye on the issues.
And then on top of that, you have Freeland's resignation.
Yeah, that was a bombshell.
I mean, she was a powerful figure in the government.
As Deputy PM and Finance Minister, she had a lot of influence.
So her departure definitely sent shockwaves through Canadian politics.
No doubt.
So let's get into the why.
All right.
The articles point to some serious clashes between her and Trudeau over the budget.
Right. Canada's facing a massive budget deficit, something like 60 billion Canadian dollars.
60 billion.
Yeah.
Wow, that's huge.
It is. And Freeland was pushing for spending cuts to try and get it under control.
Which makes sense.
But Trudeau seemed more focused on policies that were popular with voters.
Even if they weren't financially sustainable in the long run.
It seems that way.
Interesting.
So yeah, it was a real clash of visions.
And ultimately, it sounds like that's what led to her resignation.
Pretty much.
I mean, if she felt strongly enough to step down, you know, things must have been really tense behind the scenes.
Oh yeah.
This can't be an isolated incident.
Definitely not.
It points to a deeper unease within Trudeau's own party.
Yeah, there are definitely some cracks starting to show.
And her resignation wasn't the only sign of that.
Right.
We also saw Housing Minister Sean Fraser announce that he won't be seeking re-election, which just adds fuel to the fire, so to speak.
Yeah, it definitely raises questions about what's going on within the Liberal Party.
And, you know, Trudeau's political rivals are watching all of this very closely.
Oh, absolutely.
They're using this disarray to call for his resignation.
Yeah, they're arguing that his leadership has failed.
And they say he hasn't addressed the economic and social problems that Canada is facing.
They're pointing to things like healthcare, housing affordability, climate change.
All these complex issues.
Exactly.
It seems like they're saying Trudeau's government is just putting out fires instead of tackling the root causes.
They see it as a lot of short-term fixes, not long-term solutions.
Like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone.
Yeah, good analogy.
So on one hand, you have Trudeau's supporters who say these short-term measures are necessary.
They argue that they're helping people in the short term.
But then his critics say those Band-Aid solutions are just masking the deeper problems.
And preventing real progress on the bigger issues.
It's a tough situation.
It really is.
A real political storm is brewing up there.
For sure.
And I'm curious to see how Trudeau will navigate it.
Me too.
Can he hold on to power? Or is this the beginning of the end for him?
It's hard to say.
We'll have to explore that more in part 2 of this deep dive.
Sounds good.
So stay tuned for that.
All right.
But first, let's take a quick break.
Okay. It really feels like a turning point for Trudeau.
Yeah.
And for Canada as a whole.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, as we dig deeper into these articles,
Yeah.
it becomes clear that this isn't just about, like, internal political struggles.
Right.
We have to think about all those external pressures, too.
It's like a perfect storm.
Yeah,
You've got the potential for another Trump presidency.
right.
The global economy is still pretty shaky.
All of that plays a role.
It's interesting to see how these anxieties are playing out in a country like Canada.
Yeah.
Which, you know, is often seen as this,
Like a bastion of stability.
Yeah.
Progressive values.
Exactly.
And yet they're facing the same
Yeah.
kind of turmoil that we see in other parts of the world.
Right. It's a reminder that no country is immune to these global forces.
Exactly.
And it brings us back to that idea of stagnation that the articles keep highlighting, the sense that maybe Trudeau's focus on short-term solutions isn't enough to deal with these long-term challenges.
It's a common critique.
So let's unpack that a little bit.
Okay.
What are some of the specific policies that are being called out here?
Well, one example that keeps coming up is housing affordability.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It is, and Trudeau's government has implemented some programs to try and help first-time homebuyers.
Right.
But critics say that these programs are actually driving up demand.
Oh, so it's making the problem worse
That's the argument.
by making prices even higher.
Yeah, they say it's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline.
Wow.
A very vivid image.
It is.
But it gets to the heart of the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, on one hand, you want to help people get into the housing market.
Right, especially young people.
Exactly. But if those programs are just inflating prices even further,
Right.
it's not a sustainable solution,
So you're back at square one.
pretty much.
It's that classic tension between meeting immediate needs
Yeah.
and investing in long-term solutions.
It's a tough balance to strike.
Absolutely. And this isn't just about housing.
Right.
We see this debate playing out in other areas too.
Healthcare is another example.
Yeah, Canada's healthcare system is world-renowned.
Yeah, but it's under a lot of strain.
The articles talk about rising costs,
Right.
longer wait times.
Shortage of healthcare professionals.
And the critics are saying that Trudeau hasn't done enough to fix these systemic problems.
Exactly.
So you've got economic worries,
Yeah.
concerns about the sustainability of key social programs, and then you add in the wild card of a potential Trump presidency.
Right. We can't forget about that.
What would that mean for Canada?
Well, it could have a huge impact.
Remember those protectionist trade policies that Freeland was worried about?
Oh, yeah. Those tariffs could really hurt Canadian businesses.
And if Trump comes back, it's unclear if Trudeau's approach would be able to handle that kind of pressure.
That's a big question.
It all comes back to leadership.
Yeah.
Can Trudeau regain the trust of Canadians? Can he shift from short-term fixes to those big picture solutions?
It remains to be seen.
So let's look at some possible scenarios here.
Right.
Let's say Trudeau manages to hold on. He weathers the storm, wins back some support.
Right. What would that look like?
Well, it would probably require a pretty significant shift in his approach.
Yeah, he'd have to acknowledge those concerns about fiscal responsibility.
Yeah.
long-term planning.
The things that Freeland was talking about.
You'd have to show Canadians that he's serious about tackling those issues.
That he's not just focused on the next election.
Exactly.
But on the long-term future of the country.
Exactly.
But what if that doesn't happen?
What if the pressure's too much?
What if he's forced to resign?
That would be a major shakeup.
It would throw the entire Canadian political landscape into chaos.
You'd probably have a leadership race within the Liberal Party.
Possibly a snap election.
A lot of uncertainty.
And of course, the opposition parties would be ready to pounce.
Oh yeah, they'd be eager to present themselves as the alternative.
So that's one possibility.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a kind of middle ground.
What do you mean?
What if Trudeau stays on as prime minister, but in a weakened position?
Like a lame duck.
Exactly.
He's still in charge, but his authority is waning.
Yeah, maybe he even loses the next election.
But manages to cling to power just long enough to oversee a transition to a new leader.
So we've got these three potential paths:
Three very different paths.
the comeback,
The ouster.
and the slow fade,
Each one has huge implications for Canada.
and for the world.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even in a stable democracy like Canada, things can change very quickly.
We've covered a lot of ground today,
We have
from Freeland's resignation.
to these bigger challenges facing Canada.
And it's clear that this story is far from over.
Not by a long shot.
It raises these fundamental questions about leadership
Economic stability.
and a nation's ability to navigate a world that feels
Increasingly uncertain.
turbulent and unpredictable.
So to our listener out there, we want to leave you with this thought.
Okay.
Keep your eye on Canada.
Yeah.
What happens next could have ripple effects far beyond its borders.
Definitely.
And as always, stay curious.
Stay informed.
And don't be afraid to ask those tough questions.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, so we've talked about Freeland's resignation and all the political maneuvering and the different ways this could all play out.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
But what does it all mean?
Right. What are the key takeaways here?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about global pressures and economic anxieties and this sense of stagnation in Canada. So where does that leave us?
Well, one thing that really strikes me is how much this situation in Canada mirrors what we're seeing all over the world.
Oh, interesting.
You know, like that growing distrust of institutions
Right.
and those anxieties about economic stability.
Yeah, that feeling that governments are struggling to keep up.
Yeah. It's
Like even Canada.
which, you know, has this reputation for being stable and progressive.
Right.
Even Canada is facing these same challenges.
It really shows you that no country is immune to these global forces.
True.
And it raises some really important questions, I think.
Like what?
Well, like, can Trudeau, or any leader for that matter,
Yeah.
actually bridge that gap between short-term needs and those long-term solutions?
It's a tough question.
It is.
And can they restore that trust in government?
Right. That seems to be eroding in so many places.
If not, what happens then?
Yeah, what are the alternatives?
What happens when people just lose faith in the system?
These are questions that go way beyond Canada.
Absolutely.
They're questions we all need to be thinking about.
It's a lot to process, but I think that's why these deep dives are so important.
Yeah.
We start with one specific event,
In this case, a resignation.
right? And we end up exploring these much bigger themes.
The things that are really shaping our world.
It's about connecting the dots, right?
Yeah. Seeing the patterns.
Understanding the forces that are driving change.
I think that's a great way to put it.
So to our listener out there, we want to leave you with this final thought.
Okay.
This situation in Canada, it's kind of a microcosm
Interesting.
of the challenges that a lot of democracies are facing right now.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
The choices that are made in the coming months by leaders, by citizens, they're going to have a huge impact.
Definitely.
Not just on Canada.
But on the world as a whole.
So stay curious, stay informed,
Always good advice.
keep asking those tough questions.
Couldn't agree more.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive,
My pleasure. Has been a great discussion.
and we'll see you next time.
Sounds good.